He slapped me on our honeymoon and smiled like he'd done it before. Before I say anything else, I just want to thank you for being here. If my story touches your heart or opens your eyes, please consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it'll help them the way I wish someone had helped me. My name is Maggie. I'm 28 years old, and I live in Oregon. I work as a school counselor, and I always thought I was good at reading people. But I missed all the signs with Ryan. He was charming, funny, and always knew the right thing to say. We met 2 years ago at a charity event. He wore this tailored suit and had that confident smile. Everyone liked him instantly. My mom adored him. My best friend Leah said he was perfect, and even my usually cold father said, "He's a good man." When he proposed, it felt like a dream. He did it during a trip to the coast, on a cliff with the ocean crashing behind. I cried. He cried. I thought I had found my forever person. Our wedding was small and beautiful. We left for our honeymoon in Maui the next day, full of excitement. The first 2 days were great. Walks on the beach, fancy dinners, long talks. I remember thinking, I'm the luckiest woman alive. But on the third night, everything changed. We were back in our hotel room. I had made a small joke about how long he took to do his hair before dinner. It was silly, harmless. But something shifted in his eyes. He walked up to me slowly and slapped me. Hard. I didn't even react right away. My face stung, and I just stared at him in shock. And then he smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not an I'm sorry smile. No, this was calm. Like he'd done it before. Like it was normal. I stood there frozen. My heart pounded, and my brain raced, but I couldn't move. He just turned away, picked up his phone, and started scrolling like nothing had happened. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just went into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the tub for what felt like hours. I kept thinking, what just happened? And even worse, what did I do to deserve that? I told myself maybe it was stress. Maybe it was just a terrible mistake. I wanted to believe that so badly, because if it wasn't a mistake, then who had I married? But deep down, something broke that night. And I knew this wouldn't be the last time. Looking back, I can still picture the first time I saw Ryan. It was at a charity fundraiser for underprivileged kids. I was helping organize the event, and he was one of the donors. He walked in wearing a navy blue suit and had this calm confidence that made people turn their heads. When he came up to the table I was working at and complimented the setup, I remember blushing like a teenager. He smiled, asked about my job, and by the end of the night, we were laughing over cupcakes at the dessert table like we'd known each other for years. Ryan was a financial advisor. Polite, funny, thoughtful. He listened like what I said really mattered. On our first date, he brought me sunflowers because I'd casually mentioned once that roses weren't my thing. That kind of thing kept happening. He remembered details, opened doors, and always made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. My mom adored him. My best friend Leah said, "If you don't marry him, I will." Even my dad, who rarely showed much emotion, told me, he's a solid man. We dated for a little over a year before he proposed during a weekend getaway. He had a private little setup by the lake, fairy lights, wine music. It was perfect. I cried. He cried. I said yes without a second of doubt. But now, when I think back, I realize there were small things, quiet signs that something wasn't right. Like the time he snapped at a waiter for bringing the wrong drink, and then laughed it off like it was nothing. Or when he made a comment about how one of my friends talked too much, and that maybe I should keep some distance. He would disappear for hours and say his phone died, but always with just the right words to make me feel silly for worrying. He had moments where his jaw would clench, his eyes would go cold, but then he'd blink and smile, and I'd convince myself I imagined it. And sometimes he'd say things that hurt, like, "You look better when you try harder," or, "Maybe you shouldn't speak in meetings so much, people notice." I'd feel a sting in my chest, but then he'd hold my hand and call me beautiful, and I'd let it go. I wanted to believe he loved me. I wanted to believe I'd finally found someone who saw me. So I ignored the signs. I told myself love wasn't perfect, and I kept walking forward, straight into something I wasn't ready for. When we came back from the honeymoon, I told myself what happened in Maui was a one-time thing. A mistake. Maybe the trip, the heat, the stress. Maybe it had all gotten to him. I didn't want to believe the man who held my hand through every hard day, who whispered forever in my ear, could be the same man who slapped me across the face and smiled afterward. So, I pretended it didn't happen. For 2 weeks, everything was fine. He made me breakfast, sent sweet texts during the day, even picked me up from work with a coffee waiting in the car. I convinced myself things were back to normal, maybe even better. Then it happened again. We were in the kitchen. I had made pasta, his favorite, but I added mushrooms, not knowing he didn't like them. He stared at his plate, quiet at first, and then said, "Do you ever listen to anything I say?" I laughed, trying to lighten the mood, but he wasn't smiling. The next thing I knew, his fist hit my shoulder so hard I dropped the plate I was holding. I backed away, stunned. It hurt. It wasn't a slap. It was a punch, sharp, intentional. He stood there breathing heavily, and then, just like in Maui, the calm returned to his face. He apologized the next morning, said he was stressed, hadn't slept well, felt overwhelmed at work. He brought flowers, held my face in his hands and cried. I didn't cry. I just stood there, numb. That night, I sat in bed with my journal and wrote everything down. I didn't know why. I just needed to see it in black and white. I listed the dates, the words he used, how I felt. I kept the journal in the back of my sock drawer. A part of me still believed I wouldn't need it, that it was just a phase, something we'd move past. Leah noticed something a few days later. We were at lunch, and I reached for my drink with my left hand, wincing slightly. She looked at me and asked, "Are you okay?" I smiled too quickly. "Just slept wrong," I said. She tilted her head. "Maggie, is everything okay with Ryan?" I told her everything was fine. Of course it was. But the truth was, I had started Googling things like what to do when your husband hits you and early signs of abuse in marriage. I read story after story, and they all sounded too familiar. Still, I couldn't bring myself to call it abuse. Not yet. I couldn't picture myself as one of those women, the kind people whisper about, the kind who don't leave. Because if I was one of them, then I'd have to admit something terrifying. I had married a man who was hurting me, and I wasn't ready for that truth. Not yet. After that second hit, things didn't go back to normal. Not really. Ryan didn't need to raise his hand often anymore. His words did enough damage. He started small. He'd ask me where I was going, then check the location on my phone, just to be safe. At first, it felt like concern. Then it became routine. He didn't like certain outfits. Said I looked too available. If I wore lipstick, he'd ask who I was trying to impress. I stopped wearing makeup altogether. I stopped going out with friends because he'd sulk or accuse me of flirting. He didn't forbid me, not directly. He just made it so exhausting that staying home felt easier. He even convinced me to switch jobs, said my school counselor position didn't pay enough, and suggested I try something new, something less emotional. I didn't want to leave, but he kept pushing, telling me I was wasting my degree. Eventually, I gave in and moved to an office job he helped me find. He said it was better for us. But I knew deep down it was better for him, easier to control. The physical violence came in waves. Sometimes weeks would pass without anything happening. Then out of nowhere, a slammed door, a shove, a bruise. I told myself I was just clumsy, tired, off balance. Anything but the truth. On our 1-year anniversary, he booked a weekend at a fancy hotel downtown. It was supposed to be romantic, a new beginning. But that night at dinner, I laughed at a silly joke the waiter made about dessert, and Ryan's smile vanished. His grip tightened on my hand, and he whispered through clenched teeth, "Do you always have to throw yourself at every man you meet?" When we got back to the room, I barely had time to close the door before he shoved me against the bathroom. My head hit the tile, and I bit my lip trying not to cry out. I stayed silent, frozen. He left the room, slamming the door behind him. As I sat on the floor, I noticed something, a faint red light outside through the peephole, a hallway security camera. It probably caught the sound of the door slamming, maybe even his shouting. Maybe it could be proof. That night, as I lay awake beside him pretending to sleep, something shifted inside me. I didn't know how or when, but I knew one thing for sure. Someday he'd regret this. It happened over a phone charger. Something so small, so stupid. I had borrowed Ryan's charger earlier in the day and forgot to put it back exactly where he left it. When he got home and couldn't find it, his mood flipped like a switch. He started yelling, accusing me of being careless, of disrespecting his thing. I tried to explain, but he didn't want an explanation. His hand hit the side of my face, so hard I fell into the coffee table. Then came the kicks, to my ribs, to my thigh. I curled up, arms over my head, waiting for it to stop. When it finally did, I crawled to the bedroom and locked the door. My hands were shaking. My whole body hurt. And then I did something I hadn't done before. I called Leah. The moment she picked up and heard my voice, she knew. I didn't even have to say the words. I just sobbed. I told her everything. The slap in Maui, the punch, the control, the lies. All of it. "Maggie," she whispered, "you have to leave him, please." But I couldn't. Not yet. I didn't even have a plan. I had money, but he controlled the main accounts. He knew my passwords, had access to everything. And more than anything, I was scared. Not just of him, but of what came after. I told Leah I would figure it out. I just needed time. That night, after Ryan fell asleep like nothing had happened, I limped into the bathroom and took photos of the bruises. I emailed them to myself from a new email address I created just for them. I started a file on a hidden flash drive, copying down dates, places, and details. I requested copies of old hotel reservations and medical record, always giving some excuse to the receptionist. A job change, insurance paperwork, anything believable. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was collecting. A week later, I searched online and found the name of a domestic abuse attorney in town. Janet Keller. Her reviews were full of words like fierce, relentless, and trusted. I made an appointment under a different name and met her at her office during my lunch break. She listened quietly as I showed her everything. The bruises, the journals, the hotel stay where I suspected the hallway camera had caught audio. She nodded, calm but focused. "If you can catch him in a lie," she said, "with proof, you'll own the courtroom." That stuck with me. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, power. It was small. It was quiet. But it was mine. And I wasn't going to let it go. It took weeks of pretending, smiling at the right times, laughing at his dry jokes, cooking his favorite meals just the way he liked them. I had to make Ryan believe everything was fine. Like I'd finally settled into the kind of wife he wanted me to be. Quiet, obedient, forgiving. Then, one night over dinner, I brought it up. "Remember that hotel we stayed at for our anniversary?" I asked softly, stirring my soup. "It was nice. Maybe we could go again? Just the two of us. No work, no stress." He looked up, surprised but pleased. "You want to go back?" I nodded. It's been a while since we had a proper weekend away. He booked the room the next day. I made sure to suggest the same floor, same room, same hallway with the security camera. I packed carefully, leaving just one thing behind, his shaving kit. I knew that would do it. He was obsessed with his appearance, especially during trips. The first night passed quietly. He was in a good mood. Too good. But the second night, as I pretended to unpack, I casually said, "I think I forgot to pack your shaving stuff." He turned sharply. "You what?" I shrugged, playing it off. "I thought you put it in. It's just for a weekend." His face changed, that familiar storm in his eyes. "You always mess things up," he muttered, voice rising. I stayed quiet. Let him get worked up. I could feel my heart pounding, but I reminded myself, this time I wasn't helpless. He exploded, yelled loud enough to wake the whole floor, slammed the door so hard the walls shook. I knew the camera outside would catch it all, the shouting, the door, his threats. I waited. Later that night, while he slept, I quietly got dressed and slipped out of the room. My hands were shaking, but I stayed focused. I walked down to the front desk and asked to speak with the night manager. He was young, maybe in his 20s. I told him I was concerned about an incident that had occurred and that I had the right to request hallway footage under the hotel's guest privacy clause. I used just enough legal-sounding words to make it seem official. He hesitated, but eventually agreed. Said I'd need to fill out a form and show ID. I did. 2 days later, they sent me the footage via email. I watched it on my phone in the bathroom, the door locked. And there it was, the proof. He had no idea, but soon he would. With the footage saved and backed up in 3 different places, I finally had something solid. Proof. Not just words or bruises that faded, but sound, rage, a slammed door, his voice shouting in the hallway. It was real now, and I knew what I had to do. But I couldn't rush it. So I kept smiling, kept cooking dinner, kept pretending everything was normal. I kissed him goodnight and laughed at his dumb stories like I always had. But every free moment I got, I was planning. First, I opened a secret bank account. I used my maiden name and a new email address. I started transferring small amounts from the grocery budget and leftover gift cards. Enough to start over, but not enough for him to notice. Next, I packed a go bag, just the essentials. Birth certificate, a change of clothes, cash, burner phone, USB drive with all the evidence. I hid it in a shoebox under the bed, buried beneath old receipts and winter scarves he'd never touch. Then I reached out to a local women's support nonprofit. I found them online while pretending to be browsing furniture. Their website had a quick exit button in the corner. That detail alone told me they understood. I filled out their contact form late one night, and by the next afternoon, I was speaking to a caseworker named Erin. She didn't ask a million questions. She just asked, "Are you safe right now?" I said yes for now. She helped me plan every step. She even connected me with a safe house where I could stay after I left. Finally, I told Janet, my attorney, that I was ready. We picked a date. It was a Tuesday morning. Ryan had gone to the gym, like he always did. He never took his phone inside, just left it in the car. I waited until the garage door shut behind him. Then I moved. I grabbed the go bag, my phone, and walked out. Didn't look back. I had a ride waiting 2 blocks away, a volunteer from the nonprofit. She didn't say much, just nodded and drove. When we reached the safe house, I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. I was shaking, but I wasn't scared anymore. I was free. I sent Ryan one text. "You'll hear from my lawyer." Then I blocked his number. He called 40 times that day. I didn't answer once. At the safe house, I met with Janet. We reviewed everything, the footage, the photos, the journal, the hospital visit records. That afternoon, we filed charges. The process had begun. Ryan didn't know it yet, but the woman he thought he'd broken? She was just getting started. The courtroom was cold, quiet, and filled with people who didn't know the truth, not yet. Ryan walked in like he was the victim. Hair perfectly styled, suit pressed, face set in a fake expression of sadness. He even dabbed at his eyes with a tissue as if rehearsed. When the judge asked for his side, he spoke softly, respectfully. Told the court I was emotionally unstable, overly dramatic, and possibly suffering from anxiety. He made it sound like I had imagined everything. I sat there still, hands folded in my lap, heart pounding but face calm. Janet, my lawyer, gave me a small nod. It was time. She stood and said, "Your Honor, we have footage." Everyone turned as the courtroom screen lit up. The hallway camera, the timestamp, the moment he screamed, the sound of the door slamming, his voice angry, loud, cursing. It echoed in the room. No one said a word. Then came the recording from another hotel incident, my shaky voice, his yelling in the background, the thud against the wall. It was undeniable. His attorney stood up and tried to object, tried to shift the focus. But the judge held up a hand. "Mr. Delaney," the judge said, "do you deny this is you in the footage?" Ryan didn't speak. His face had lost all color. His confident act was cracking. I didn't blink. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Thompson, do you feel safe at this time?" I said clearly, "No." That's all it took. A restraining order was granted immediately. Then the judge did something I hadn't expected. He turned to the bailiff and said, "Take him into custody. Charges are being filed." Ryan stood there stunned as they put him in handcuffs. His eyes met mine, but I didn't look away. He shouted my name once, like it would still scare me. It didn't. I watched him be led out of the courtroom, silent, powerless. Janet placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. I nodded, holding back tears. But they weren't from fear. They were from freedom. After the court hearing, I expected to feel instantly better, like everything would be fixed the moment he was gone. But healing doesn't work that way. The first few weeks at the safe house were strange, quiet but not peaceful. I kept looking over my shoulder, jumping at every door creak. My body was free, but my mind was still trapped in old fear. The bruises faded, but the memories didn't. Not right away. Leah visited often. She brought snacks, fuzzy socks, and little notes that said things like "you're stronger than you know and one day at a time." She didn't ask me to talk unless I wanted to. She just showed up, every single time. That meant more than anything. Eventually, I moved into a small apartment. Just one bedroom, tiny kitchen, no one waiting at the door to judge how I looked or where I'd been. For the first time in a long time, I chose my own furniture, my own schedule, my own peace. I went back to my old job at the school. My boss hugged me. My coworkers welcomed me back with soft smiles and hot coffee. Some of them knew. Most didn't. But I didn't care. I was back doing what I loved, helping kids feel safe, seen, and strong. I also started going to a support group for women who had been through abuse. At first, I just listened. Their stories sounded like mine, too much like mine. And slowly, I started sharing too. I talked about Maui, about the charger, about the night I walked out. Every time I spoke, something heavy lifted off my chest. Pain shared isn't pain halved, but it is pain that no longer hides. I still had nightmares sometimes. Loud voices, locked doors, cold stares. But when I woke up, I was alone in my own bed. And I'd remind myself, he's gone. He can't hurt me anymore. Months passed. Then one morning, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the state correctional facility. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening. Inside, a single sentence, parole denied. I held the letter in my hand for a while. Then I lit a candle, dropped the letter in the flame, and watched it burn to ash in the sink. That chapter? It was over. I still have scars, some you can see, some you can't. But they don't control me anymore. They remind me of what I survived, of who I used to be, and of who I refuse to become again. I'm not just a survivor. I'm someone who made it out and decided to start living again. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, not because I'm ashamed anymore, but because I remember how long I stayed quiet. I remember the shame, the confusion, the constant self-blame. I used to ask myself every night, how did I let this happen? Why didn't I leave sooner? The truth is, abuse doesn't always start with fists. Sometimes it starts with silence, with being told you're too sensitive, with little jabs disguised as jokes, with being isolated from friends and made to feel like you're the problem. It creeps in quietly like fog, until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize who you are anymore. That was me. I stayed longer than I should have. I stayed after the first slap, after the second punch, after the bruises, the broken things, and the broken parts of me. I stayed because I wanted to believe in the version of Ryan I first met, the charming, sweet man who brought me flowers and opened car doors. I clung to that version like a life raft. But that version didn't exist. He was just a mask. I don't blame myself anymore for staying. And if you're in it, if you're stuck in the cycle of hope and hurt, I don't blame you either. Leaving isn't easy. It's terrifying, but you are not weak for being afraid. You are not broken because you stayed. You are human, and humans deserve love that doesn't hurt. If my story sounds like yours, leave. Don't wait for the next time. Don't wait until it's worse. But if you can't leave yet, I get it. I was there too. So start small. Start collecting receipts. Keep records. Hide journals. Take photos. Talk to someone you trust. You don't have to be ready today, but one day you will be. And when you are, hit them where it hurts. Not with violence. Not with revenge. With the truth. Because the truth, when you're finally brave enough to speak it, is the one thing they can't silence. It saved me. And maybe it'll save you too. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have walked away like I did? Or tried to hold on a little longer? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear them. And if stories like this speak to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.